My ex-husband, William McGee, was the director in the Itta Bena area. I helped with the classes. A lady, Mrs. Blackwell, Alice Blackwell, and Annie Dale Payne. There were probably others. There were a lot of people involved, but everybody didn't actually lead the classes. But I can remember those.
Itta Bena, Mississippi. This town, now known as the location of the educational oasis of the Delta, Mississippi Valley State University is also an area that was affected by the civil rights movement. This town has seen the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, but nothing could quite compare to the event that's the civil rights movement. Journey with us as we discover the history of the civil rights movement in Itta Bena, Mississippi.
Like many of the surrounding areas, Itta Bena has been a place of integrated blacks who escaped the grudges of slavery, discrimination, and segregation. With the integration of blacks also came the installation of Jim Crow laws, which were a set of laws that were made for the sole purpose of oppressing and terrorizing African American citizens, denying them the right to be a citizen and have normal lives as Americans, leaving victims to be caught in the wake of these laws.
There were two signs, colored entrance and white entrance. We knew not to go into the white entrance. That was at the laundromat, that was at the doctor's office, and the other thing was we knew that the railroad tracks, which are significant in little bitty towns, that was the dividing line between the black and the white community. You did not venture over across those tracks because you knew that you were going to be killed or abducted.
That was a very drastic and devastating time for Black America, a movement which was started by Rosa Parks, her refusing to give up her seat. And not too long after the murder of Emmett Till, not too far from here. So this area was affected in a great way during the civil rights movement as it come down trying to get equal rights, equal opportunities. And this been a predominant a white city back then. Blacks were still finding their way. They were sharecroppers. Many of the establishment, what you see, was mostly whites. Blacks started moving in around the 70s and the 80s, when I moved here in 73, so Itta Bena has come a long way.
Remember about if you went to jail, what would happen? Okay, now if you was black, it was only one sheriff that was in Itta Bena, Mississippi, and his name was Ed Wilbur during my time. But if he needed backup, he would call a few other people. As I said, you know, one person in particular, I know him well. He was from Port Gibson, Mississippi, and he was a student at Mississippi Valley. So he got locked up one night, and he was telling me that he asked Mr. Weber about a phone call. And Mr. Weber at the time, he didn't call you by your name. He called you Sonny Boy. And he just shook his head and said, Sonny Boy, your mama can't get you out of here tonight. And if you stayed on a plantation, and which most black people worked, that if they got locked up, they was out by Monday, cause the boss man, or Mr. Charlie, whoever you might want to call him, told Mr. Weber, you keep him out of jail, and I'll keep him in the field. So that was for most of them, because they work almost from sun up to sundown. They had long hours.
Between the 1930s and 1940s, a jailhouse was installed behind a nearby diner. This jailhouse was the location where countless amounts of blacks were held up, some in blistering heat and some in shivering cold. This jailhouse was also not permitted by the city for legal building. A former resident, Ricky McCaleb, managed to give us some background on the history of the jailhouse.
It's been here a long time, okay? It was probably put in under the wrong circumstances years ago, okay? The man that used to run the Delta Cafe in probably the 30s or the 40s, I would be willing to say more close to the 40s. Now the bricks are going to date back to the turn of the century.
This jailhouse also managed to house 20, 30, even up to 60 African Americans jailed, simply because they wanted to fight for their human right to vote.
It was 40-something of us that stayed. There were probably about 70-something arrested, but they let all of the children go. They said anybody under 15, they could not keep them. And they let them go, but it was 45 of us that stayed in jail for 58 days.
It was put in by an individual, not the city, okay? Even though it sits on city property, the city property is the exact square footage of the building that it sits on. And this thing here is it's a monument to something that should never have been and should never take place again. It's just awful. All of these old buildings have a lot of history involved with them, and all of them are not bad like this one. Some of them are good, right. But everybody wasn't bad. There was only a small group of bad people, and most people believe in right and wrong, and that's where they're brought up in this country, to believe in right and wrong. And if you're wrong, somebody should stand up to you, no matter who you are.
Further into the town, past the marketplace and into the nearby neighborhoods, was a small community church house. This church was a meeting location for civil rights protesters who would strategize, organize, and formulate plans to protest, boycott, and fight for their rights to vote, and for their rights to be humans, and for their rights to be able to have a say in the country laws and how they relate to black people. This location was also where many African Americans learned how to register to vote, which was illegal during that time.
We would have classes teaching people how to try to register. We started having citizenship classes. We started having adult education classes. And we would take people to the courthouse every day to try to get registered. Everybody would get denied because they had to interpret a section of the Constitution, and that was never to the satisfaction of the registrar. So what we would do would come back and go back over that with the people who had gone to make an effort, and we would go back over sections with them until they could go back. You had to wait so many days before you could go back and try again. So what we would try to do is get them better prepared before they went back for the second attempt.
Said there was a lot of fear out there, and still a lot of fear out there. Many people are still afraid. They won't speak out on issues when they should speak out on issues. For an example, I was maladjusted enough to sue everybody I had to for the rights of black people, but at the same time, I was focused on a point to make us absolutely make Caucasian live up to what they wrote. They wrote the Constitution. They wrote the Constitution that all men are created equal and so forth, and the right to vote. So we have to hold them to that line. So I was maladjusted enough to sue in order to get that done.
On June 5th, 1966, there happened a great event that made a great step towards obtaining U.S. citizenship, a march from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi. The March Against Fear was the idea of one, James Meredith, who spearheaded the 3-week March for Freedom. With strong hearts and even stronger wills, thousands of African Americans marched the 209-mile walk to Jackson, Mississippi, facing much adversity and resistance along the way. This group, led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., would make waves that would soon make people in the surrounding towns, regions, and states follow in their footsteps.
Like there was only one church in Itta Bena that would let us have meetings at the church, and that was Hopewell. We couldn't go in the other churches because of fear. He came through Itta Bena, and they were marching down number 7, marching to Jackson. And it's my understanding that he spoke in the Uptown Square, and that he spoke when they got to Quito. And people were joining them at every stop. And some people went all the way to Jackson. Some went a certain distance and had to turn around.
The effects of the civil rights movement can still be seen today. The movement eventually laid the groundwork for what is now the Black Lives Matter movement. The BLM have followed in peaceful protests to fight against police brutality, oppression, and racism. These moments, while sometimes fatal and dangerous, also show the bravery of African Americans that will echo through the barriers of time for years to come.
We still got a long ways to go. I don't want young people to give up. I want you to be absolutely sure and get focused. And when you get knocked down, don't give up. Just fall forward and get up and continue. Because suffering does teach one wisdom. I know that from my longevity and the things I had to go through in order to get an education. So stay focused and move forward. And don't be disappointed if you make some mistake or things don't go right. Try it again and again and again. And you'll find that after so many times, you'll become more familiar and you'll become a success. Then if not, suffering does teach one wisdom. You've learned from the circumstances that you've had to endure.
The project was funded for $25,000 from the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area grant. They see grant opportunities to fund in the Mississippi Delta for the rich history that sits here, from the land, civil rights. They have different segments that they focus on. And this project fell under the civil rights era, and that's how the project was funded. Also, the students of Mississippi Valley State University from the Department of Mass Communication were selected to document the process of the document the process of the monuments being put in Itta Bena, the historical significance of the process for the grant, to show how the grant contributed to the production, to implementing the markers in Itta Bena. 2 markers. We did have a celebration and it was twofold. One, to celebrate the markers being in place, and two, to showcase the students' film for the project. And there's more, and it was great. It was actually a really good program. We had participants from a lot of different areas, and we had a lot of student participation too. And the students really did well. So basically the students produced a featured film for the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area, and also for the city of Itta Bena. And we also had a church, New Bethel MB Church, volunteered to support the project as well, and also the City Council of Itta Bena.
Perception, but it adds to it. It adds to it in a very rich way. That the civil rights movement in Mississippi really happened in small communities. That it was really a community-based effort. And we know that Emmett Till, the lynching of Emmett Till, was the spark that was the fuse of the modern civil rights movement. And that happened right up the road in Tallahatchie County, its lynching. That it activated this movement throughout small communities, just like that one, Lonnie, Mississippi, where he was accused of listening to Carolyn Bryant in 1955. So that's what this project does, is it shines a light on smaller communities and activism in smaller communities and the power of the people to make it happen.
The project was very successful, is very successful. Due to COVID and other situations, things are delayed. But however, a lot of people learned a lot of information. The students, the citizens, people who were not familiar with the area, learned more about the history of Itta Bena. I even learned some more things, some more facts. It was amazing. So I would say so far it's been successful. The key for me is that the students were able to apply what they learned in the classroom to a real world experience. That was the goal, and that their production would show that. And then for the city of Itta Bena and Mississippi Valley State to at least have the conversation with each other and come together. That's where the breaking bread comes in. Old thing was, let us break bread together, come together and talk about things and work things through things and identify and just have a good old time. And I feel like we had a good old time at the celebration, and even the parade. It was cool. It was really cool. Due to COVID, we didn't walk it and simulate the march, but it was still really cool to experience it. And the other marker other than the jail is at the turn of River Road and Highway 7 South, which is the way the march from Memphis to Jackson. I think it was not quite a month that it took them to walk. That's the trail that they went. And those two markers are the Mississippi historical markers. And the one marker that we're waiting on is the freedom marker, which is we also have applied for it to be on the U.S. Freedom Trail, the National Freedom Trail. So it's a really big deal. I'd just like to thank everyone who participated and who's been a part of the program, because I feel like we've all been a part of history. Your grandkids or grandchildren will one day look back, and if they're in this area, or even look back on when people list locations that are historical, Itta Bena is there. 3 locations, not just one, but there's 3 locations. And it's even more history there. The next phase of the goal is to turn the Hopewell Church into a museum with artifacts from this area. That's the next phase of the process, is that it will that we could restore the church and turn it into a museum with artifacts from the Civil Rights era and other historical significance of this area there.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.